Hello everyone, welcome to the round 21 trade targets and preview stream, and it will be a big trade target stream because there are some big players that have been named this week. Nathan Cleary, Latrell Mitchell, David Feeder, Harry Grant, people are trying to get those guys in. Yeah, lots of big trades happening this week, so lots to get into, but thank you to everyone who is joining in the live stream and all listening back on audio. I will quickly shout out as well to anyone who's listening on audio. Please do give us a review on Spotify. That is very appreciated, just to get the podcast out a little bit broader to the wider, the interverse out there. Hello though to Davey K, who has been doing all my hard work for me, asking for likes. Davey K, I'm just going to leave you to be my hype like man. How about that? True fans, give the stream a like before it starts because we know it's always so good. I will admit sometimes I'm a bit all over the shop, but I appreciate that. Davey K, My Car, Roger Duckling, Kane, I'm here for the hair porn. Justin Case, great name, Justin Case. Jason Yang, I miss you too, Jason. Joshua, everyone in chat, drop a like for our boy mine. Yep, you're all getting the right page. You're all on the right page. I'll love to see it. 8:45, wide awake for the hair. Yep, the hair's looking good. You all saw the haircut on Sunday, so nothing new. Just got a little touch up. Amon, the eyebrows looking elite today. Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Can we change the name to Amanda Hair Appreciation Stream? We'll see how we go. But I do want to quickly give a shout out. I can't see him in the chat here, but to Josh Wallace, who last time last week was giving me so many super chats, being very generous, and I said I'll give you a poem on Sunday, and I forgot. I'm so sorry, Josh, if you're listening on a replay. So I want to quickly start off the stream with a little poem for you. So Josh Wallace was hitting us with the super chats. I promised him a poem, but I didn't deliver on that. So it's a belated poem for Josh, and hope he enjoys. Let's all gather round and rally the boys for Josh's 4th of July birthday. Fireworks aplenty, hope the party was cray. Now the real question is, Cleary, Hines or SJ? There's your poem, Josh. That's your commemorative round 21 / poem for Josh. There you go. Running it straight for Josh. Yeah, no, I especially after I kind of said, no, I can't do it, I'm too tired. Then I forgot. I actually felt quite bad. I want to be honest and, live up to expectations. So there you go, Josh. Hopefully you enjoyed that poem. We'll obviously talk about Hines, Cleary and SJ. Can't even get, why can't we just get a hybrid Kleins, SJ halfback combination? That would be ideal, but it isn't quite so easy, is it? So I'll quickly start off the stream just with a update on where I'm sitting rank-wise. 1287, so decent week last week, but only a small rank rise of 69. I'm still a child inside, that's for sure. So just inside top 5,000. Look, we'll just keep trying to push for as high as we can, but let's see how these things go. I would have rather to have been a little bit higher from that with that score, but at least it's not a red. At least it's not a red arrow. If you hear any creaking sound, that's my dog following me upstairs to my bedroom. I can't show you on camera, but he's just right there staring at me right now, which is fantastic. So that's where I'm sitting rank-wise. So I think, obviously, there's a lot of big questions about, trade targets and whatnot and things. So we'll definitely get into those. I do want to just kind of set the scene, though, just with another look at the run-home draw. And, just kind of, because I think this is helpful for when you're looking at, 50-50 about selling players, buying players. I think, it's always nice to have a reminder of, what does a draw look like for the run-home? And so this is basically no real science apart from my own idea of power rankings, I guess, if you want to call it that. So yeah, the way it's funny enough, Manly come out on top of my list here, which you look at the draw, including New Zealand, Penrith and Sharks, probably doesn't scream like an easy draw, but it's probably because of that Bulldogs, Dragons and West Tigers game that they're featuring so high. Maybe there wouldn't be, in my opinion, the best draw, but still, good if you're looking to, if you're a Ruben Garrick owner, you can hold on to him. If you're looking for pods in your second or forward, maybe Olakuatu, maybe a cooler in your backs. Again, this maybe gives you an idea of who are some teams that you can target with a good draw. Rabbitohs, definitely going to be a big talking point this week, getting all of their origin contingent back. Latrell's back, Cam Murray's back, Campbell Graham is back. So, unfortunately, Munro is out, who I was actually looking at as a downgrade option this week. So I still might get him as a downgrade because apparently he's just been injured. He wasn't named for New South Wales Cup, but I know he was heading into this week a popular trade and as a downgrade. So I wonder if that will cool off a little bit, but he looks like an option who, if he does get that right wing spot, few good matchups on the horizon with the Tigers, Dragons and the Newcastle Knights for the Rabbitohs. That round 26 bye is a little bit awkward, but round 27 at home to the Chooks. Look, the Rabbitohs, in these kind of last week of the season games in the regular season, they traditionally have beaten the Roosters, and that's when Cody scored 203 points about 3 seasons ago. So it could be a good matchup again for the Rabbitohs. Canberra, number 3. So if you're again looking for a pod, someone like Matt Tumiko could be a nice little option. Dolphins is interesting because, Osako is actually, I think, 4th most traded out player. Could be someone you can actually hold with a few good matchups on the horizon. Although I will admit that, yes, Ewan Aiken on his outside does not help him get some attacking stats. Warriors in 5th. I mean, we'll speak about it more with SJ, but the Warriors run home is absolutely golden. Given the quality of the team, the actual Warriors themselves, I'd probably have them as number 1 or 2 for run home draw. And if we go down to the bottom of the ladder, or bottom of my scale, I guess, Cowboys I've got as bottom because of games against the Broncos, Penrith, Parramatta, and the Sharks. Although Sharks, it's a home game. Broncos is a home game. Penrith could be a game where Penrith players get rested. So while they're the bottom of my table here, again, you need to take into account the quality of the team, Cowboys being in very good form. And I think some of those home matchups are quite nice. So I wouldn't probably consider the Cowboys to have the worst draw, if that makes sense. But Broncos, I've got them second from bottom. Again, obviously a good team, but a few tough matchups, which people may be looking at. Payne Haas, Reece Walsh are probably the 2 most popular trade-ins from this team. Walsh doesn't really excite me too much because of this draw. Payne Haas, to be honest, this draw is actually quite nice because of tough games. He'll probably play big minutes, and that means he'll rack up those kind of base stats. And finally, maybe last team to maybe comment on is Parramatta. So they've been a team who've been a bit of a mainstay, I guess, in a lot of our teams during this bye period because they played every major bye week. We're now past that. No more kind of mini bye weeks. It's just one team on the bye each week. Parramatta's draw is getting tough. Cowboys, Melbourne, good Dragons game at home in round 23, but then Broncos, Roosters, Penrith, and then a bye. I'm personally looking at potentially moving off guys like Clint Gutherson this week because he's at over 900k, and I think there's a good opportunity to cash in at his value, and probably expect that he's not going to be averaging what he has been over the last 5 weeks. Looking ahead for the rest of the season. But anyway, that's kind of just setting the scene, I guess, for some of the difficulty of draws and whatnot. But we'll get into all the kind of more popular trade questions as well right now, basically. So I won't really go through much in TLT changes. I think I put a tweet out earlier in terms of some of the key updates from TLT, so I might just quickly rattle them off before we start getting into the nitty gritty. But yeah, we know Cleary and all the Origin stars are back, so Cleary is obviously going to be a massive talking point just now. Talakai moved to the bench, Connor Tracy in, Matt Moylan's out, Teague Wilton is out, Latrell is back, no Tyrone Munro, who we've already mentioned. Campbell Gillard is out for 4 games, Tino out for 3. We'll definitely talk about front row forward because I know Tino is now obviously a very popular sell. Josh Papali'i and Corey Horsburgh are back for the Raiders, so again, something to consider for a front row forward option in Big Red, and maybe it affects Joe Tarpany. Reece Walsh is back from a suspension, and I've got James Tedesco back as well for the Roosters. Aside from that, though, I didn't really have too many other notable TLT changes, but I did want to, I guess Toby Sexton is one here from seeing a question from David, what happened to Toby Sexton? He got a HIA last week. I didn't actually notice that he was not in the team, but I think Carl Flanagan is in the 7 jersey for the Bulldogs. All right. I think this is probably the biggest talking point of the week. Put your hands up in the chat if you can, put an emoji or something if you can in the chat as well, if you agree that the biggest talking point this week is Cleary, Hines, SJ. What the hell do you do in terms of choosing which of the 2 do you want to go for, kind of thing. So I'm very keen to see what you guys also think in the chat. So if you've got any opinions on this, please do let me know. I'll kind of pick them out and read them out because it's always good to get different people's opinion. I'm just one man, and you're looking at my rank 5,000. Maybe sometimes my opinions are not always the best. So I like to see what you guys think about it as well. But yeah, so Cleary is the top most traded in player. Most popular trade that's happening this week is Mitch Moses to Nathan Cleary. So I think that's probably one I might just cover very quickly. I think that's a good trade. Already spoke a little bit about that Parramatta draw toughening up a little bit. Moses and the Eels, just maybe not the Eels in general, but Moses feels to be like a player who is somewhat of a flat track bully, so that when the matchup is there, he can kind of get all those attacking stats. He's a goal kicker, so Parramatta score more points. He's going to be doing well. But like if you look at the beginning of the season, for example, when Parramatta did have a fairly tough start, when they were versing Melbourne, Sharks, Manly, Penrith, and the Roosters, during that time, his high score was 83 against the Sharks, but otherwise we're looking at 16, 59, 53, and a 34. When the draw started opening up a little bit, when he was versing the Titans, the Knights, during the Origin period, we're looking at hundreds, 90s, and 80s. So I think Moses 41 last week as well, relatively high break even of 112. Cleary, look, even if he's not goal kicking this week, I think if you've got Moses for like 40k, I think that's a pretty straight swap in my opinion. I've got the expected points here. I've tried to add one. I've gone really heavy into numbers in the halfback because I thought it was such a interesting topic of discussion. I wanted to try to put in a lot of my, my number crunching, as you guys know I like to do on this channel. So I've got expected points, which is purely looking at number of games left for the season and season average. I've got Hines top at 700, Cleary next at 581. Third is SJ. Third is actually Cherry Evans at 469. That's because he plays an extra game over SJ, but I don't think many people would be going Cherry Evans, so I'm kind of ruling him out there. So you got SJ then at 462, and then Jerome Hughes and Mitchell Moses are pretty much neck and neck, 441, 438. So you're looking at like a 150 point jump between Moses and Cleary for the rest of the season, which in my opinion is probably worth the trade. And I think for this week alone, I think it's a good trade. I can see AJ29 saying rocking Hines and Moses. Look, Moses, he's been good, but I do think that with this draw toughening up a little bit, it's really only round 23 where I think you might be a little bit afraid of not having Moses. But aside from that, looking at those other matchups, maybe the next best would be the Roosters in round 25. But I really do think those other matchups, tough away games against the Cowboys, Storm. I know that the Eels do well against Storm, but they're not leaking that many points. I think Moses to Cleary is an upgrade I would do. I don't think Moses is in my top 2 halfbacks or top 3 halfbacks for the run home. Charlie saying Hines and SJ for the run home. David saying the same. Real is saying the same. That's my combo at the moment as well. Just quickly getting back to those expected point stats, I've then also broken it down into the last 5 round average, applying that for the rest of the season. Again, Hines is at top, 714. Next is SJ, 570, and that's because that's Moses at 570, but I don't think that's probably repeatable given the tough draw. It's pretty close between Cleary and SJ. 567 for Cleary, 552 for SJ in the rest of the season. That's because SJ has been killing it over the last 5 weeks. I think he's got 4 tons in his last 6 weeks, something crazy like that. Now, the second last thing I did in terms of number crunching was I actually looked at the NRL SuperCoach app. I've got that NRL SuperCoach Plus membership, and so it shows you what's the average that this player has scored against their upcoming opponents. So again, I looked at that. Probably not the most realistic or the best predictor of points because, form is a big, massive thing. SJ could have averaged really poorly against this team, but, based on recent form, I think is probably what's most appropriate. But if you just want to purely look at what they've averaged against that opponent coming up in the past, Cleary's number 1, 493. Then it's Hines at 472. Then it's Cherry Evans at 439. Then it's SJ at 416, tied with Jerome Hughes. So when doing all that number crunching, it came clear to me that Hines is still, I think, the number 1 halfback, probably for SuperCoach. He's averaging 100. And the last thing I did in terms of number crunching was I looked at what's their averages so far this season against top 8 opposition, bottom 8 opposition, and how many percentage of their games have they scored 100 plus. Because I think halfback is the upside position, right? So you want to be making sure that the guy you've got there is going to get that ceiling. Hines' numbers are just, again, ridiculous. Average versus bottom 8, 108 points. Average versus top 8, 87. So even against these tougher opposition, Hines is still averaging like mid-80s. Cleary, same comparison. Top 8, 86. Bottom 8, 97. Now, I've put an asterisk next to that Cleary 97 because that included that 32-point game against the Dragons when he got injured early on the game. So to be fair, because he was on like 32 points after 20 minutes, I just gave him 100 just I think that it's probably a fair assumption that he'd get 100 in that game. If you do that, then it's a 97 average against bottom 8. SJ's got 82 against bottom 8 and 73 against top 8. And then on the 100 plus, Hines, 43% of his games this season, he scored over 100. Cleary, 33, and SJ, 28%. So I think kind of bringing that all together, I know Hines' draw is not the best and he's got some tough matchups. I just think he is that matchup proof. And I think I've seen a couple of people on Twitter asking me, like, could you go Hines to SJ and run Cleary SJ for the run home? I still personally don't feel like that is something I want to be doing. I think this week is a great matchup for Hines. It's a bottom 8 opposition in Manly. Fitzgibbon's kind of run the axe somewhat through the team, putting Talaka on the bench, dropping Moylan. I think he's put a lot of the team on notice where, maybe not Hines, obviously, because he's a different beast in that team, but Fitzgibbon's probably putting a rocket up them, basically telling me, I want to see a turnaround in performance. This game, Sharks Manly, looks like a game where they'll put on 45 plus points, in my opinion. Hines can go huge. I think Hines is in the top 10 most traded out. I think that's, to be honest, I don't think that's the sensible play at all, based on the matchup. And I think even with Penrith Rabbitohs, 22, 23, looking beyond that, Titans, Newcastle, Canberra, I think there are some games there where Hines can still score well. So I've not really contemplated moving on Hines, in my opinion. I do think he is the number one. So I think that's where I stand on Nicho Hines. Keen to see what you guys think in the chat as well. I appreciate there was a lot of numbers thrown at you, so obviously you might need some time to digest all of that stuff. But that's where I'm sitting at the moment. I think Hines, for me, still is the number one halfback, irrespective of the draw, because that average against bottom 8 is still elite. So I think it's really between Cleary, SJ. So a lot of you already in the chat have mentioned you own Hines and SJ. I'm in the same boat. I personally, I can't, so shout out to SuperCoach Guns. He posted something on his Twitter earlier today, which was that the top 6 worst defenses in the comp by points conceded, in order from worst to the next, downwards. You got the Bulldogs, Dragons, Dolphins, Tigers, Titans, and the Raiders. SJ plays 5 of these teams on the run home. The draw run home is just unbelievable for the Warriors, and the way that he's playing, I can't sell SJ this week, put it that way, because he scored 100 plus versus Canberra last time, and it's a home game. Who's fifth? Dino, the fifth player was Sexton. So I excluded Toby Sexton because he's only played 2 games. So I thought, just to be fair, I wanted to include players who had played a minimum of say 10 games. So Sexton is actually 5th on the halfback average ranking, and this ranking is based on averages. That's what I've taken here. So Sexton's the guy who's 5th, but I just didn't include him here. But yeah, for me, SJ, I can't sell him this week. I think Cleary will outscore him this week. And it could be scary knowing that, Penrith's run, looks a little bit tough in the near term with Sharks in Melbourne, but they're home games. And Cleary is just Penrith are just a different beast, right? Manly, Titans, Parramatta, and Cowboys on the run home. Draw feels irrespective for Cleary. So I think if I was being honest, I'd probably say that Cleary is second best halfback behind Hines for the run home, potentially first. But I think if you're an SJ owner, the way that I'm feeling at the moment, with the way the Warriors are playing, the form is just ridiculous. SJ's in the such a good position as well for a Dally M. Just looking at that draw, I can see myself looking back at the end of the season if I sold SJ for Cleary, thinking, why did I do that trade? Sure, maybe Cleary outscores SJ by 30 points, maybe 50 points. But for the use of one trade, and just seeing all these great games that the Warriors have, I think my head is saying that SJ at least hold for this week. I don't think I'll be moving to Cleary next week. If the Sharks look terrible, Cleary absolutely kills it, and SJ's on the bye, maybe at that point it's tempting, because maybe then you go, okay, maybe I go SJ to Cleary next week with a view to then go Hines back to SJ in round 23, potentially, if you've got the trades to do that. So I think for this week, at least, I'm holding SJ. I do think, just based on those numbers and pedigree, I do think Hines, Cleary still are the top 2 fullbacks for the run, halfbacks for the run home. But SJ is just putting up a ridiculously compelling case as a run home guy. And I think if you're on sub 6 trades, honestly, I think just hold SJ for the run home, and I think you'll be just fine. I think you'll be okay. So Nick's saying Hughes to SJ or Cleary. I think if you're selling Hughes, I think I would still go to Cleary, just because you've got that better matchup this week and you've got the game next week. And just based on everything I've said, he does look at the end of the day, Cleary does play an extra game, excluding any potential for rests. He does play an extra game over SJ, which is a big deal as well. So I still do think it would be Cleary over SJ for me. Best 2 for head-to-head from Dino. So this is a really good question. So if you're, say, looking at your head-to-head final, so say around 23 to 26, the best 2, if I look at that, it would, say round 26, your head-to-head final, SJ's got the best matchup, Dragons at home, and really good matchups up until then as well. So I think SJ would be in my top 2 for head-to-head perspective. And the other one, I'd probably take Cleary. I think Cleary's run between 23 to 26 is just that much, a little bit better, because his tougher games are home games. So Melbourne and Parramatta, Manly and Titans are his easy games, and they're away. That's not as big of a deal. You look at Hines in comparison, he has the Cowboys and the Rabbitohs away. So round 24 is really scary. Titans at home and maybe Newcastle, but I think I prefer Cleary's home games in that stretch. So, and I think this is a good point as well. People are looking at potentially bringing SJ in. I don't think he's a trade in at the moment, just because of that bye next week, as Otis Take Notice says. But yeah, anyway, that's my take on the Hines, Cleary, SJ. Hopefully that answered any of your questions about how I feel about them for the run home and maybe the next couple of weeks and from a head-to-head perspective. But again, still happy to see how you guys feel. I won't be going Cleary this week. It is a bit scary, but I'm kind of just hoping that, if it's a carve up, this is something that's exactly what pure hindsight is saying, that if the Panthers destroy the Dogs, maybe Cleary gets a rest in the last 15 to 20. I'd be praying for that, but look, if the Panthers are destroying the Dogs, Cleary's probably on like 130 already. I'm just hoping that SJ doesn't get too far behind him this week. And I think just by keeping SJ, it allows me to use trades in other positions and maybe chase a bit more pods, and not necessarily pods, but it just allows me to do some trades elsewhere and just maybe stick with the Hines SJ combo for the run home, because it is nice knowing that with SJ, once you get past that barring any injury, you can just leave him there. And his last 5 round average of 92, you could see that for the run home. And it's based on those numbers of 5 round averages that I've put up there, he's only 15 points behind Cleary, so it's not that big of a deal if as long as he can maintain this form, which I think there's a good chance he can. All right, that is my rant about the halfbacks. Hopefully you'll enjoy that. I think the next part of the stream, 23 minutes in, and that was the one topic, but I did think it needed some extra analysis. And yeah, do give the stream a like if you enjoyed all of those numbers and analysis. But it was very fun to put together, and help my thinking as well. The next thing I wanted to touch on for this week was front row forward. So Tino is the most, just having a quick look see here. Yep. Tino is the most traded out player this week, and I think it's for good reason. He's got that 3-match suspension, which is a bit unlucky if you got him in recently, but it is what it is. You just have to play with the cards that you're dealt with. And if he's out for 3 weeks at 808k, it's a bit annoying, but at least you can sell him at a value that's pretty good. Like, you can go down to a lot of these other good front row forwards, make like 100k on it. So look at the positives, I guess, in that respect. A couple of people I think were asking me about could you hold Tino if you're really low on trades? You definitely could, because if you get him back around 24, look, draw doesn't really matter as much for a forward, but he does have Sharks, Penrith, Melbourne, and the Bulldogs. So probably not many attacking stats in those first 3 games, but tough opposition. So you can expect him to play big minutes after 3 weeks. He'd be probably willing to rip and tear when he comes back. But I do think that at that value, probably the most sensible option I think would be to move him on at this point. And I've kind of listed, I think, the main front row forward that you could target: Fanua Blake, Payne Haas, Joe Tarpany, Tohu Harris, and Corey Horsburgh. And again, I've put together expected points based on season average for the rest of the season, as well as the 5-round average of that player applied for the rest of the season based on the number of games that they've played. So Tarpany actually came out close to top in when I did this, and that's mainly because the Raiders don't have any more buys for the rest of the season. But I'm going to assume that most of you probably already own Tarpany, and you're probably not looking to actually actively trade him in. So I think the more popular question that I was getting was Fanua Blake or Payne Haas. So Fanua Blake obviously was tremendous last week, scored 112 with a try and a try assist in that game against the Sharks. And so look, we know that he can get those attacking stats. There was a period during the middle of the season where he was just averaging like 95. I still think I would lean towards getting in Payne Haas, if I'm being honest. Main reason for that, I think, is just consistency. It was a couple of weeks ago, people were thinking with Fanua Blake, minutes were starting to reduce. Can he be moved on or cashed in? So that was only a couple of weeks ago. Obviously now he's come out with a big ton, which, he's probably more likely of getting you a ton than, say, a Payne Haas. But I think Payne Haas is just much more likely every week to give you 75 to 85. Broncos' run home is quite tough from an attacking point of view. Like, if I just want to read out the draw for them, it's the Rabbitohs, Roosters, Cowboys, Parramatta a bye, Canberra in round 26, and then Melbourne in round 27. So, like, those are tough matchups. A lot of those teams have got good forward packs. I can see Payne Haas easily playing 60 minutes. I think he's been averaging 50-something. Let me just have a quick look what he's been averaging this season so I don't make up crazy outlandish numbers. Let's have a quick look see here. Sorry, this is not part of the schedule. 59 minutes he's been averaging so far this season. And I can see that stepping up to like maybe 62 minutes, say, for the run home. And I think his PPM doesn't really seem to slow down. So I think Payne Haas just seems to be like every week a safe 75 to 85. And he has punched out, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 scores over 90 so far this season. So he's got not maybe the classic ceiling of 100, but like a 90 you'll take most weeks. So I think on pedigree, and I think just the tough matchups, I do think that Payne Haas is probably slightly hard edge with Fullback. But I do like Fullback for the easy matchups that he's got. The only thing I'm conscious potentially of with Fullback is that, the Warriors do have a pretty stacked bench, and I think Fullback will still play decent minutes. Just looking at that run home, yes, that chance of attacking stats are there, but maybe there's also a risk of if the Warriors get ahead, they're pushing for a potentially top 4 spot, they want to play in finals. Maybe they manage Fullback to an extent for the back end of the season. So maybe they kind of just will down his minutes a little bit. If they're absolutely smashing a team, let's say, I don't know, round 24 against the Tigers. Sorry, Tigers fans, but let's say they're up like 40 to 10 with like 20 minutes to go. There's every chance Fullback just gets a rest, doesn't need to play out the rest of that game. So he's been averaging 58 minutes for the season, but that was probably inflated by some higher minutes he had to play during the middle of the season when they had a lot of injuries. Since then, he's been averaging around mid-50s kind of minutes. So I think minutes for Haas would be a little bit better. So I think, again, that safety and security makes me think I'd rather have Payne Haas just for the run home. Questions about Tohu. So Tohu played like 30 minutes last week. So a lot of that was due to, apparently he was having an illness coming into last week, and apparently he picked up a wrist complaint during the game. So a couple of factors, the Warriors are well ahead. So there wasn't really any need to have Tohu play big minutes. It is something I'm thinking about, though, because currently my 2 gun front row forwards are Tarpany and Tohu. This was a question I got as well, was how essential is having 3 front row forward guns? Because I think this person who asked that also had Tarpany and Tohu. I think with Tohu, similar thing could happen with Fullback, where maybe minutes get managed a little bit. So I do think it's potentially still worth getting in a 3rd front row forward. You probably don't have to play them every week, but if you've got the trades, I like having a Haas-Tarpany type kind of combo. And then if you have Tohu as a reserve, or you just have him on the bench as depth cover, it's pretty good depth most weeks. So I still think there's some value in getting 3 gun front row forwards, but I would hope that Tohu Harris's minutes just kind of, go back to what we normally expect from him. And I'm hoping last week was a bit of an outlier. Fangnado says, is AFB and Tarpany good for the run home? Glad I didn't buy Tino. Yeah, look, with Fullback and Tarpany, you're probably getting the second and the third best front row forwards. Probably Payne Haas is number 1, but I've spoken about it a bit in the past with the front row forward. The difference in average between the best and the rest is kind of pretty minimal. Like you can see here, all these, Tino, Fullback, Payne Haas with the top 75, 72, and 75 average. They're like 3 points within each other. If you've got Tarpany, he's about 9 points lower, which granted is not nothing, but it's not going to kill you if, over say, if you look based at the expected points that I've got, by playing an extra game, Tarpany could actually outscore Payne Haas for the rest of the year. So I think that combo for Fullback and Tarpany is probably just fine, Fangnado, in my opinion. I think if you can use trades elsewhere, like to target those halfbacks, fullbacks, those upside center wings, we'll get to like Nickel Klukstad, Val Holmes. I think that's much better use of your trades in this kind of latter stage of the season. We'll take a couple more questions on front row forward, and then we'll kind of move on from that one. But so if you've got any front row forward related questions, chuck them in the chat. We'll try to tackle them now while we're on the topic. AFB, a pod captain. Probably is a pod captain this week, but I do think that there are really good matchups. Panthers versus the Bulldogs. Warriors, to be fair, is a good matchup as well against the Raiders at home. Just with Fullback, I don't know, it feels like the forward pack for the Raiders is quite strong, so I wonder how much his upside will be potentially this week. Would I trade out Tohu or Horse out for Payne Haas? To be honest, I probably wouldn't do either. I'd maybe give it one more week with Tohu just to see what happens with the minutes. Like his break even is not super, super high. at 68. Same with Payne Haas. Like, he could easily score 88 and not change in price. So you might not be that worse off with another week of information in terms of the money, if you did want to go Tohu to Payne Haas. Because remember, Payne Haas is also coming back from his own kind of injury. It wasn't a serious one, but maybe there's potentially some limitation this week. So I think Corey Horsburgh is perfectly fine. I think if you've got Horsburgh, he's actually a really good option to hold for the run home. Plays every game. He's been pretty good. He's probably close to about a 65-70 average when he plays in the middle at lock. So I like Horsburgh. I'd probably keep him over Tohu, but I don't think you need to do Tohu to Payne Haas at least this week. Maybe you can give it a week and see what happens with Tohu's minutes. If he goes back to the minutes that we expect, then maybe you could just hold him, and like, I may not potentially get Payne Haas in for the rest of the year. Horse or Payne Haas for the run home, I'd still probably take Payne Haas. I think, even though he plays one game less, I think he had, based on my expected points that I've got there, I think I've got him just about to edge Corey Horsburgh, but it is close. So I think if you're going maybe more pod, Horsburgh, but I do think I'd probably take pedigree in that case and go Payne Haas. Tino to Tarpany, then bring in Grant. Sounds like a good combination of moves, bro. So I think if you can do that, because you're freeing up like 180k going Tino down to Tarpany. The only thing I will say with Tarpany is that with Papali'i and Corey Horsburgh back, he's had a really good stretch the last few games. 5-round average of 72. I think his 3-round average is a little bit higher than that as well. Let me just have a quick look at what it is here. He's got a 3-round average of 82. I do think with Papali'i and Horsburgh back, I do think he will slightly regress to that kind of mid-60s average. So just be aware of that if you are looking to potentially bring in Tarpany in this week. All right, I think that hopefully covers most of your front or forward questions, so we'll probably leave it there. Next thing I did want to get onto was centre wing. So kind of just going along with the theme of, most trade out, traded in players. Most traded out player is, the third most traded out player is Ronaldo Mulitalo. Fourth is actually Jermaine Osako. And a lot of people are pretty mad at Ronaldo Mulitalo for what he's dished up the last couple of weeks. And to be fair, I'm with you there. Very frustrating with what he's given us the last 2 weeks. Just also on the most popular trades, Isaac Tungo is the 8th most traded in player. I think if I'm having a quick look at the most popular trades, Mulitalo to Munro is the 5th most popular trade. That's the only one actually featuring centre wings, and that's probably to make money. So I wanted to go through with the centre wing in more detail. So again, if you've got centre wing questions, it's a good time now to chuck them in the chat. So what I've done here, I've just kind of taken my pick at a few different centre wings. I haven't been able to cover everyone. So before you say, what about X centre wing? There's like a bazillion centre wings in the game, so it's very hard to try to cover all of them, but I've tried to cover as many of the relevant ones as I could. I still do think that the top 4 I would want to have for the run home is Garrick, Marzu, Holmes, and Nickel Klukstad. I've got their prices as well. Val Holmes would be nice to get, but 865k just feels like so much money. Like for 150k less, getting Nickel Klukstad with his run home, I'd probably lean towards getting Nickel Klukstad. I'm really, really heavily considering trading him in this week because I kind of like that matchup as well. Ex-team at home. The buy in round 22 is not ideal, but hopefully it's a week that you can cover it in your center wing. Like, for example, if you can bench AJ this week, you can play AJ next week against the West Tigers when you have Nickel Klukstad there on the buy. And then the run home we've already spoken about as well. So I've got all the kind of expected points again on the screen here based on the 5-round averages. And what I've done in the table below me that you can see, I do recommend watching this on YouTube as well if you are listening on audio, just to see some of the numbers. So what I've done is based on that kind of expected points based on 5-round averages, tried to sort it from who's top to bottom and who's expected to get the most points, I guess, if you want to call it that. So I've still got Marzu, number 1, which I do like. I think 715k is still a good price in Marzu. The matchup this week's not the best against Melbourne at home, but I do like him as just a trade-in for the rest of the year. Ponga is completely just absolutely firing. I think Marzu is still a fantastic centering option as well. Isaac Tongo, 2nd. So his 5-round average is obviously a little bit inflated inflated for good reason. He's been absolutely killing it. Again, last week he was so good that one of the tries he scored where he ran like half the field was just ridiculous. So I've got him as number 2 actually. Holmes number 3, Manu 4, Garrick 5, Nickel Klukstad 6, Dallin Watene-Zelezniak at 7, and then To'o at 8th is kind of how I'm rounding out my top 8 centre wings. And you can see all the way down the bottom, probably, it's not unfair, it's all based on numbers, but Alex Johnston is at the bottom, 265, Isako's quite far down there at 330 points, and Mulatalo's down there at 350. So I can see why there's lots of people wanting to sell Mulatalo based on the 5-round average of 58. And fairly tough games of Manly, maybe not Manly this week, but Penrith and Rabbitohs are a bit tougher. So I can see some questions already about Mulatalo, so let's get stuck into those. William, pretty much the question, will Mulatalo a trade out? Who to trade for? So on Mulatalo being a trade out, I think if you're trying to make a downgrade to say get money for Cleary, let's say you're going Hughes to Cleary, you need 200 plus K, and Mulatalo to like a Munro, just if you're happy to take the nuff. Look, I'd say it's probably fine, because whilst Mulatalo for the majority of the season has been good, he hasn't scored yet over 100. So he's been consistent, but he hasn't really got that game so far that you'd be frightened of or be really punished by. So I think for that, I like Mulatalo as a downgrade option, or potentially like an upgrade. If you're upgrading him to say, I think if you're trading out Mulatalo as an upgrade, I really think it has to be probably 4 probably, I should say. I'd say Marzu, Nickel Klukstad, Val Holmes, Tungo. I'm going to assume most people have Garrick. I think those 4, if you're saying you're trading Mulatalo to them, I'd probably say it's a fair trade because, Tungo's got a great matchup this week, plays every game for the rest of the year. Holmes is just a gun. Nickel Klukstad is a gun. So I think those are probably the select few I'd say, trade out Mulatalo. But broadly, I think Mulatalo is fine to hold as well. Like, I'm probably looking to hold Mulatalo this week. He's gone down to 525k, so there's not a great amount of value selling him. And I think Manly this week at home is a good matchup that you can play him in. I think sit him for round 22, 23. You can play him against the Titans, and you can play him against the Knights in Canberra. You can maybe sit him for that Cowboys game. So I think he's a good player just to have on matchups. And remember, like, the last 2 weeks have been very frustrating, but he has been doing very well for the rest of the season. So I don't want to get too reactionary just based on the last 2 weeks. Mulatalo or Talakai a trade out. I think, Pablo, if you've got that pairing, Talakai for me would be a sell. So Talakai, he's at a much better selling value at 632k, and he's named on the bench, which means that value could start going away very quickly. So I like Talakai as a trade out. The matchups are not that easy in the near term, and it's like 80k jump to get to Nickel Klukstad. That kind of a trade. I think that's probably a trade that I do like. Talakai sell. Yep, kind of covered that. James as well. Is To'o a viable shout over Tungo now that Cleary is back? So, good question. So let's quickly I haven't prepared for this, so I'm going to have to just kind of answer this on the fly. I'm going to have a quick look at the beginning of the season when Cleary was fit. So To'o did have that 112 game against Manly in round 6. Aside from that, though, it was kind of around the mid-60s. And to be honest, I'd say it sounds weird with a 64 average, but I think he's been a bit underwhelming, in my opinion. I do think that Tungo is showing more from a Supercoach point of view than To'o. I think I see what you're saying with Cleary back, meaning that, the right side gets more ball. But I think in some of these easier matchups that they have, I don't necessarily think that's a guarantee for To'o to get the ball. I've mentioned it a couple of times in the last few weeks where the centers for Penrith, Tungo and Crichton, they're run first guys. There's probably going to be enough space for them to score themselves than have to dish to their winger. So I think at this point in time in the way that they're playing, the centers for the Penrith seem to be actually doing better. Like, Taruva hasn't really been doing anything good or relevant at all the last few weeks. I do think the centers seem to be profiting more than the wingers. So I still think Tungo, his form is amazing. So I do like Tungo, I still think, over To'o. To'o's price at 628k, it's a good value, but to be honest, I'd actually maybe take a punt over someone like a Campbell Graham, Sorry, I've got Campbell Graham incorrect. I've got him for 5 games. That's not right. That should be 6 games. So I think I've undercooked AJ and Campbell Graham's scores. Let me fix that there. So they should be on 6. So yeah, Campbell Graham should be on 300 and 660, 400. He should be on 400. Let's call it 420 points. And AJ should be on 318 points. So look, AJ will still be down the bottom there, but I don't mind someone like a Campbell Graham. This is actually a good segue into something I do want to show you guys as well that I got from, it was on Stats Insider. I'll try to find a link for it and I'll put a link for it in the chat below. It's a great little website that someone shared with me earlier today. Let me quickly send it. Let me put it in the chat for you guys. Basically what it tracks over the season is on which edge do teams score their tries and also concede their tries. So it might be useful as well if you are looking at center wings. So the one that I've got up on screen here at the moment is tries scored. And so I think the biggest thing that I took away, again, another reason why I'm so keen on holding SJ and Nickel Klukstad, is you look at the Warriors, second from bottom, 48% of their tries are scored on the right. They've got such a strong bias for that SJ, Nickel Klukstad, DWZ stack. So I really like, if you are pod chasing, if you can stack Nickel Klukstad and DWZ, like Nickel Klukstad is just feeding DWZ like free try line breaks. Nickel Klukstad's getting free line break assist, try assist. So I do like stacking those two. Another thing I was mentioning Campbell Graham. With the Rabbitohs, they've actually scored more of their tries this season on the right-hand side than the left-hand side. So 46% of their tries on the right, 40% on the left. And another reason why that's notable is if I quickly go to the next screen, which is where do teams concede their tries. So what you want to be looking at here is essentially the opposite. Where do they concede their tries? So the best matchups that the Rabbitohs have on the run home is the Tigers, Dragons, and Newcastle. So if you look at the Tigers, they concede 44% of their tries to their left, so that would be the opposition team's right. The Dragons, 56% on their left, so the opposition team's right-hand side. And the Knights are kind of 30%, so maybe not hugely a factor. But it does seem like, right side players for the Rabbitohs could be the way to go. I still think you hold AJ if you've got AJ to this point. I would probably sell Mulatalo over AJ. I think AJ's draw is a bit better for the run home. But I don't mind taking a pod route, maybe like Campbell Graham, who's been really good this season as well. It's another reason why I'm thinking Munro still could be maybe a worthwhile downgrade, because if it is just an injury, hopefully we get some news about that. If it's hopefully just an injury and he's back in that team, the right winger for the Rabbitohs could actually be the place to target for the run home in these easy matchups, just looking at some of these charts and graphs here. So something to think about as well. Those were the two main call-outs that I saw from these two things. If there's anything else that I think of, I'll let you know. But yeah, something to think about with your center wings. We'll try to get more into some of your questions then as well now about centers, so I'll have some water in the meantime. Yeah, so Pablo's saying, thoughts on bringing in Nickel Klukstad this week, even though they have the bye next week? I'm still very keen on getting Nickel Klukstad. So he's got a break even of, I think it's about 88, I want to say. It's around the 80s, so it's not super high break even. Like, the good thing with him is that he's got a pretty good floor. Like, his lowest score recently was 35 against the Rabbitohs, and that was in that complete, it was monsoon rain and everything. Outside of that, 61 against Parramatta away, 92, 145, 84, 103, 94. Like, the scores are just ridiculous. And yeah, so he's got an 82 break even, which, look, I kind of think at home to the Raiders, it's a good matchup. So I don't mind getting the Klukstad in early if it works with your trade plans. Just having a quick look at the Raiders, where do they concede tries? Raiders aren't really too bad on either edge, so it's not really necessarily a great matchup from that point of view, but still I think it's a good long-term trade-in of getting Nickel Klukstad. Got one more centre wing that I need for my head-to-head finals. 23 to 26 is priority. Who goes first, AJ, Mulatalo, or Turuva? Okay, so if you really focus on round 23 to 26, who do the Sharks have in that time? They've got Rabbitohs, Titans, Cowboys, Newcastle, and I think AJ is definitely one that you hold in that period of time, because I think you just have to try to make sure you've covered in round 26 with the bye. But outside of that, you're looking at Sharks, Dragons at home, and Newcastle. I think AJ probably has to stay during that time. I still think I'd sell Turuva over Mulatalo. I think Turuva, despite how good the draw is, he's just not really done the business. At least Mulatalo has shown more this season as putting out higher scores. Yep, this is a good point from pure hindsight. Don't forget that Souths basically travel around the country to play over the next 6 weeks. Yeah, so their game this week is Sunshine Coast. So even though it's a home game, it's actually in Queensland. Cairns, Perth, Tamworth. Yeah, only one game in Sydney is in week 27. Might impact performance. It's definitely a good shout, and potentially it could happen, but I don't know. I think what's more probably better to look at is the turnaround time. So do they have like shorter turnarounds between games? I think that's more likely to be a factor than the fact that they're traveling. But I haven't looked into that. Who's a better option for the run home, Marzu or Nickel Klukstad? That's a tough one. That is a tough one. Jeez, that is toughy. I feel like I've got some of these expected points, so I'm just looking at them. Have I done my maths right? Have I done the math right? I would hope so. I know why. It's because I haven't changed some of the 5-run averages. Sorry. So Marzu, for example, he actually has a 95-run average, not 78. I was looking at him like, why have I got him so high? Yeah, same with Tungo. His 5-run average is 87. Sorry, guys. Some of these numbers are a little bit out in the 5-run averages. So just look at the expected points. Those are correct. The 5-run averages are a little bit off. Sorry, just to give you guys a heads up. But in terms of better run home option of Marzu and Klukstad, I think I would still probably just take Marzu Toby. Just that extra game is quite big. And the thing with Marzu, even in those tough games like Melbourne this week, we know he can bang out a 50. And while the Warriors run home is good, Knights have still got some pretty good games as well. Like Sharks in round 26 at home. That's not looking like the worst matchup on paper. Bulldogs at home round 24 is really, really good. They've got some good home games. Dragons around 27. Dolphins, right? Like, it's a good draw for Knights. I still think that extra game, I'd probably just lean Marzu, but that is a very, very tough one. Ideally, I know this is a cop-out answer. I'd say ideally get both. Thoughts on getting rid of Farnworth? Yeah, look, Farnworth, Broncos have a fairly tough run, so I don't mind moving off him. All right, I think I'm going to move off the centre wing, just conscious of time. It's already been 47 minutes, and I've still got a couple of other things I wanted to get to as well. Very quickly on 5/8s, there's probably not too many questions and trades actually related to the 5/8. Like, for example, Munster is only the 10th most traded in player. Ponga's actually not even in the top 10 most traded in. I imagine a lot of that is due to a lot of people probably already bought him last week, and also now he's very expensive, so it's a bit harder to get to him. But based on the numbers, Ponga is at the moment the leader for expected points for a 5/8, followed by Munster, then Cody, purely because, again, Cody's playing one less game. But I think on averages, there's a good chance that Cody per game would outscore Munster. It just comes down to Munster plays that extra game. So I've sold Cody, which a couple of weeks ago is probably looking like a pretty bad move. And I do fear not having Cody, which is another reason why in the next section we'll be talking about some fullbacks and a certain Rabbitohs fullback who's back this week as well. But yeah, for me, it comes down to Walker, Munster, and Ponga. I think you're 5/8. If you've got Manu there, I think it's fine. The Roosters still do have some decent games, against the Dolphins, Tigers, etc. So I think Manu's perfectly fine as your backup 5/8. But I think if you were to choose the best two, it probably would be Ponga. And I think ideally, actually, what I'd do, I'd probably have Walker and Munster as 5/8. I'd probably put Ponga as my fullback and partner him up with like a Latrell. I think that's probably how I would do it. So a couple of questions here. Munster or Walker from Laxi. Given that the buy for the Rabbitohs isn't until round 26 and a lot can change until then, I think if you're buying one now, I'd buy Cody. Better draw coming up, and I think that he's, with all those Origin players back for the Rabbitohs, I do think that they're a good team to bank on and trade in, in terms of trade in targets. So I think probably Walker, I think I'd rather prefer over Munster at this point, but if you look at collective over the rest of the season, then yeah, maybe Munster. One thing I will say with Munster, I mentioned it on Sunday. Apparently there was a quote from Bellamy where he was maybe looking at progressively resting some of his players at the back end of the season. So if you assume that Munster's going to have another rest in the rest of the season, I'd probably say then, yeah, definitely I'd say pick Cody, because I think per game he will probably outscore him. I think he's got better quality upside matchups there coming up. Manu and Munster, good duo. Yeah, I kind of mentioned that already. I think that's fine, Fagnado, but I think I'd probably try to make sure you've got Ponga somewhere in your team. This is a good question from Jason. Is Metcalf a pod if I'm looking for someone cheap? Now, this I've been burnt in terms of giving advice on Metcalf, because I thought Tamari Martin was going to come back, and honestly now, the Warriors are playing so good. Does Tamari Martin even come back into this team? I don't know, and I think his injury is setting him back until the next couple of weeks. I mean, I'm pretty sure Metcalf, like Metcalf has looked good on the eye test as well. So like it's not like he's a bad player. Like he's playing quite well. 508k. If you are going for someone cheap, around that price tag, he probably is the best option just with that run home as well. Just be wary that if you do trade him in, he's got a 6 break even. There's a possibility that you might need to use another trade on him, either to get him out, maybe if Tamara Martin comes back in. Yeah, that's probably the only thing I'd say with Metcalf. There's still a bit of a risk there, but yeah, I think if you want to capitalize, I mean, the only thing with Metcalf though probably is that what's tough is that you trade him in this week, then he's got the bye next week, and then could Tamara Martin come back then in round 22? That's the only thing, Jason. So just be wary with your trades, and could you afford to wait? Could you wait and see what happens? That's probably the only thing I'd suggest with Metcalf if you are looking at going there. What about holding Dearden? So I actually took Dearden out of this table. The main reason was that I just didn't know if people were going to be jumping on Dearden because he's like 860k. Like he's extremely expensive. I think if you own him and he's got a 44 break even, decent matchup at home against Parramatta, I think you hold him this week. Titans next week. To be honest, I think with Dearden you can probably look to maybe hold him for the next 2. And then when he's got the Broncos, maybe at that point you can cash him in for like a Cody. But to be honest, I don't even mind trading Dearden out at the moment for a Cody. You're getting like 100k doing that move. You've made a lot of money on Dearden. I do think that there was that. I just don't know how sustainable this recent run of really big scores that he got is sustainable or not. I'd rather probably take the pedigree, I think, of someone like a Latrell. Someone like a Cody. Manu to Walker. Yeah, I got a couple of questions about this. I've got Ponga, Munster and Trell, or nuff out Tohu and go Mulatalo to Tungo. Would I go Manu to Walker? I probably wouldn't, because I still think the Roosters have got some good matchups, and I think Manu's been looking decent. Still scoring well despite the Roosters' troubles. It's really him or Teddy, I think, are the only relevant options from the Roosters. So I probably wouldn't do Manu to Walker. I'd probably see if you can potentially do that another way. Like, for example, if you're doing Mulatalo to Walker, I'd probably say, yeah, go for it. But yeah, they're similar value, so I guess you're trading like for like price. But I think the fact that Manu plays that extra game, still has some good matchups, I think he's still someone that you can potentially hold on to. All right, we'll get on to the where's my fullback stuff? Oh, I skipped it. Never mind. Sorry. Run home fullback. So I think this will be the last key topic before I get on to captaincy. So again, one of the more popular trade-ins this week is Latrell, second most traded in player. And in terms of, and Reece Walsh is actually the he's the 9th most traded in player. In terms of other fullbacks trade movements, Gutherson is the 8th most traded out player. Will Kennedy is the 7th most traded out player, who I've not actually got in this table here. So I guess the question for this week in terms of the fullbacks is Latrell worth the trade in this week, or maybe do you wait a week? So Latrell, break even of 139, coming back from the very long, injury layoff. So I want to potentially reserve my judgment until I hear NRL Physio's thoughts on what he expects performance to be for Latrell coming back. But next week, I think I will want Latrell for sure. That Tigers matchup, Sharks, we know how the Sharks are against top 8 opposition. Dragons, Newcastle. I think Latrell will be a scary proposition to not own. So fullback ranks, I've got the averages there. So based on averages, Latrell was the 3rd best fullback. First is Drinkwater, second is Ponga, I think, in that list. So if you're looking at strictly fullbacks, Latrell's the 2nd. So this is the question, I think, from Toby. Gutherson to Latrell. So I do think, just firstly on Gutherson, I do think he's a decent trade out. So it sounds weird because, he's the 4th best averaging fullback, been really good, but it's just that run home is just very difficult. And I think last week was a taste of what can happen when Parramatta aren't fully clicking. He scored 61, and that included a try, which was probably, I think it's fair to say, fairly dubious. If he didn't score that try, he would have scored about 40, and I think his trade outs would have been even higher than what they are at the moment. And just with Gutherson, I feel fortunate in that I was able to get him when I think he was around 700k. He's made 200k in the process, got a lot of points. But just looking back to the beginning of the season when they had games, so I'll read out So I'll read out from rounds 1 to 13 when they versed what I'd probably consider tough opposition. Melbourne, 62. Sharks, 66. Penrith, 37. Roosters, 71. Broncos, 86. Canberra, 57. Rabbitohs, 25. Cowboys, 81. So, if I look at those, I'm probably thinking Guthers maybe... I always kind of view like Gutherson as that kind of mid-60s, like 65 to 67 averaging player. And I kind of feel like that's where he's going to be there or thereabouts with this end-of-season draw, plus that buy in round 27. Whereas at the moment, he's kind of priced at like a 80-plus average. So I do think it's a good opportunity to cash in on Gutherson this week. It's really only that round 23 game I think you need to be a bit worried about. But again, that week, Dillbags is expected to come back. And I think, that might potentially impact Gutherson as well. So I do like cashing in Gutherson this week. In terms of bringing in Latrell, I think if you're really low on trades, let's say you're on six or less trades, 5 or less trades, and you just kind of need to get in the guy that you just want to have for the run home, I think I'd probably go Gutherson to Latrell, because I think Latrell will outscore Gutho on averages, better matchups. We're in the late stage of the season, so yeah, sure, Latrell could lose some money, but, you could also gain some good points. Like Broncos, I want to actually give a quick... I read that it was the NRL SC Talk, I think it was Lakey who put his team list analysis together. I think he mentioned a stat about the Broncos in terms of how they've conceded recently points to fullbacks. So, let's see. Yep, so the Broncos. So Broncos going back into round 8 have conceded 80 points per game to fullbacks, opposition fullbacks, including 70 to Averillo last week. So yeah, shout out to Lakey as well for that piece of analysis. But yes, so like this is the thing. Broncos have actually conceded a decent amount of points to opposition fullbacks. Latrell, I expect him to be goal kicking. And then you want him, I think, from round 22 onwards. So I think it's I think it's a fairly good trade. And that, Brusso, you're correct. Edwards does play 7 games, not 6. So apologies for that. Again, I've probably undercooked Edwards' points there. So you can see this is the downside of trying to put too many numbers together. You make a couple wrong, and then it kind of just creates a mess. But yeah, Toby, Gutherson to Latrell, I think it's a good trade. It's one that I'm very seriously considering myself this week. The only other alternative I was thinking was, could I maybe go Gutho to Nickel Klukstad this week and maybe do something else? But I might end up just going Gutherson to Latrell. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good trade. That is, I think, one of the more popular trades happening this week. Just having a quick look here. Gutherson to Latrell is the 6th most popular trade. And I think it's pretty fair. Look, Gutherson, if you're really, really low on trades, he could just be a hold for the rest of the season, but I wouldn't expect him to maintain the average that he's been getting in the last kind of 5 to 7 weeks. In terms of Drinkwater, in terms of Reece Walsh, I don't love trading in Walsh just purely because of this run for the Broncos. I think it's fairly tough. Roosters in 22 is probably okay. But aside from that, Rabbitohs, Cowboys, Parramatta, a bye, Raiders in Melbourne, doesn't scream the best matchups. So I think for me, Walsh is probably a good price tag, but I think probably someone, I'd rather go Latrell, I'd rather go Ponga, I'd rather go, to be honest, I'd rather go someone like a Nickel Klukstad or a Val Holmes in your fullback spot over Reece Walsh, over that run home. That's my take on it. Edwards is probably going to be solid for you. Cleary back could be good things for him. Based on his average of 71 in 7 games, that will be about 440 points. That'll be 490 points, give or take. Which I think still is, it's coming out about the same as Latrell, but this is Latrell, I think, on an 80 average, and he could easily go 90 plus for the run home. So Edwards is a nice solid option, but I think in this run home, you probably want to be trying to target, I think, those high ceiling guys, which to me scream like the Drinkwaters and the Latrells and the Pongers, I think. All right, that's my take on some of the fullbacks. Drinkwater, I think, is just too expensive now to get in at over $1 million. Ponga, if you want Ponga in your fullback, I do think I'd prefer him over Latrell, if I'm being honest. I think his form is unbelievable. It does feel like the last week as well to get Ponga with a minus 33 break even. Teddy, someone that people may be looking at. I'm just not feeling it with the Roosters, so I just can't really recommend Teddy. I mean, I may be proven wrong, but I can't go Teddy myself. Is Drinkwater worth the cash, Charlie? No, I don't think so at this stage. All right, we'll quickly wrap up there in terms of the fullback chat. I'll quickly get on to captaincy, and then I want to show you my team real quick and also get to some of your questions a bit more. Captaincy this week, I think if you still own Buller, he's a good VC against the Dragons. Warriors players, I think, are good shouts as VCs like SJ or Nickel Klukstad. I like them as well for that home matchup. Nickel Klukstad I've thrown in there because, it's an X team. I think if you're unsure with captains, a safe one could be Fafita, at home to the Roosters. Should be playing 80 minutes. I've got Munster here, but to be honest, I probably wouldn't captain Munster this week. I just feel like his ceiling's not really what it has been in previous seasons. I think really it's the halfbacks. I think I'll probably be, at this stage, if I don't go SJ to Cleary, I'll probably go Hines captain at home to Melbourne, and I'll probably go like a VC for feeder is probably what I'll end up doing. Or I might go VC, because you can't go SJ and Hines combo. It has to be one of the two. So I think I'd probably go captain Hines and VC someone else like a feeder. But I think if you get Cleary in this week, I think he's your man. Bulldogs are the second worst at conceding to opposition halfbacks. Sorry, this is probably another. I probably should have considered Rabbitohs players. The only reason I didn't include Rabbitohs players was that matchup itself didn't feel like the most easy to pick in terms of high scoring. So I did exclude them for that reason. But I can see Trell VC, just talking about that 80 points per game average that the Broncos have been conceding to opposition fullbacks. The Trell VC could actually be a fairly good shout as well, actually. And to be honest, if you had the Trell, I'd say the Trell VC, Captain Hines, Cleary is probably actually the best combo that you could do this week. All right, I'll probably wrap up captaincy there. I don't want to spend too much time on it. But yeah, I'll quickly show you guys my team and what I'm thinking of doing this week. But do please give the stream a like if you have been enjoying it. So again, as per usual, don't really know what I'm doing with my team. I've got 8 trades, only about 17k in the bank, but I own Will Kennedy. I know it's a decent matchup at home to Manly, but I'm feeling that was a not very clever trade in. So I'm thinking of trading out both my fullbacks in Gutherson and Kennedy this week. So I think Gutherson, originally what I had was if Munro was available this week and set to make a lot of money, I was probably going Gutherson and Kennedy to Munro and then maybe one of Latrell or Nickel Klukstad, and then that would have left me with over 350k in the bank. So I might leave Munro for the time being, and I might just go. I really want Nickel Klukstad, I really want Latrell. I'm just trying to decide what's the best ordering of the two. I'd probably have to say the best ordering is probably to get Latrell in this week, I think, just because of, he'll play 2 games over the next 2, and hopefully if he gets through this game unscathed, I'll have him there ready to go against the Tigers, whereas with Nickel Klukstad, I can kind of make plans to get him in round 20, round 23. So at the moment, Gutho to Latrell is what I'm thinking about. That leaves me 108k in the bank. To be honest, I don't have to actually trade out Kennedy this week. One person I haven't spoken about at all this stream is Harry Grant. I didn't get in Harry Grant last week. I still could do it but I think Cook being back, I'm kind of thinking maybe I can spend my trades elsewhere. And so I could upgrade Tohu Harris to a Payne Haas, but again, feels kind of low value of a trade. I really don't want Kennedy. I don't want to have too many Sharks, I think, over the next few weeks, just with the way they're going. I think Hines and Nicola is fine. And leave it at that. I don't want to trade both of Mulatalo and Kennedy out, though, because I do think Manly is a good matchup. So what I could do is I could do Kennedy out, and I've got 645k in the bank. The only issue is that there's not a lot of players really around that price range that I could trade to, at least in centre wing. A couple of cheaper options, Karaz is maybe one. Otherwise, I might just go Munro, to be honest. I could just go Munro. If you have any recommendations for a centre wing who's cheaper than, say, 600k, let me know. But it could just be Munro as a downgrade. And then that would mean 444k in the bank, which could mean that in round 23, I could very easily go, I can go Mulatalo and Billy Smith to a Nickel Klukstad DWZ potentially, stack those two, or maybe look to try get some like a Val potentially. So these are my first thoughts coming into this week before TLT. Getting Munro and getting Latrell, and I'm conscious of getting because I've traded AJ and Cody in the last couple of weeks. I do want to try to make sure I still get some Rabbitohs attack. Otherwise, I think I might be left for dead there. But that's what I'm thinking at the moment for initial trades. Unfortunately, I can't give you really much more than that. But yeah, I think there's a good chance that one of Holmes, Latrell, or Nickel Klukside will come into my team this week. And at the moment, I'm thinking Latrell. All right, let's get into some of your questions for the next 5 or so minutes. So then we get to about hour 10 minutes. But guys, if you have enjoyed the stream, do please give it a thumbs up. Could go Sloan, or no, I don't think I'm not really interested in too many Dragons players. This is a good shout though in terms of a VC. Bateman pod VC. He could potentially be an option, against a pretty leaky Dragons team, and they're leaky on their right. They're leaky on their left side defense, which is Bateman's side. I just think with a VC, I'd rather chase someone with some ceiling, a goal kicker, for example. So I think I like someone like Latrell potentially. Avarillo, maybe. This is the thing. Some of these names I'm just not thrilled about, so I'm just kind of maybe I just go for the pure downgrade. All right, get your questions in. One person I haven't also spoken about actually just very quickly is Asako. A lot of people. Asako is one of the most traded out players this week. For me though, I'm kind of just thinking that Asako for me is fine. I think just to hold for the time being, because I think I'd rather sell Kennedy over him. I'd rather sell Mulatalo over him. So I'm kind of thinking Asako is not in my top trade out targets. Gutherson probably is. He's a bit of an exception with Gutherson because he's like 900k. So I can cash in and make some good value out of that trade. But I spoke about the Dolphins draw earlier. It's not too bad. So I think Asako could just be a nice play for the run home. Get rid of Talakai or Mulatalo. Talakai, I think. Cherry Evans and Moylan to Cleary. I think that's a good set of trades. Roger Duckling. Obviously, I'm not getting Cleary in this week, which is a bit scary. But yeah, fingers crossed we survive. Thoughts on Tino to AFB and Ronaldo to Tungo, or Isaiah Katoa to Metcalf? We can only do one of the two. I think ICAT to Metcalf is a better upgrade in your team, but Tungo is a better option to trade in. So I think ICAT, to be honest, I think he's kind of taking up a pretty valuable position. So I think Metcalf, probably Jason, but I spoke about it a little bit earlier with some of the risks with Metcalf. Will Blake Taft being on the bench affect Trell? Potentially, but he was playing a bit of a bench role earlier in the season. He was kind of just playing I think he was playing some middle for 5-10 minutes. So probably not someone I think I'd be too worried about. Another person I haven't spoken about at all this stream is Fafita. I think if you don't have Fafita, feel happy that he only got 60 last week in what was probably one of his quietest games in a long time. 60 in a quiet game. Yeah, no Tino. I think Fafita needs to step up. Yeah, I would be getting Fafita at all costs this week. Not all costs, because you don't want to sacrifice everyone, but yeah, definitely I think this is a great week to trade in Fafita as well. Jaden, Talakai and Wilton out for Nikora and Nickel Klukstad. I like those trades. I think those are really good trades. I do think Britton Nikora, if you haven't got him either, he's still a good trade in despite the tougher draw. Last 2 weeks, he's had base of 60, base power 72, so that's pretty good numbers. Well, that's really, really good numbers. So if it's a tough matchup, he can still pump out pretty solid scores. Wait a week on Fafita? No, I think I would just get Fafita in this week if you can. Would I bring in Drinkwater if I could afford it? Probably not. I'd rather just go Val Holmes, to be honest. He's 200k cheaper than Drinkwater, and he's the goal kicker. So I think I'd probably just take Val Holmes instead. Why do I leave SC Plus off? I leave it on until I need to quickly check true value. Purely just default. I don't touch it. It's just what it is. Is Jackson Ford a play? Depends on your other players that you have to leave out. I think he played 80 minutes last week, didn't he? But I don't remember him really getting any kind of attacking stats. So I think he had a fairly quiet game. He's got 63 in 80 minutes, 50 in base. It's a home game. Scored. I think he's a solid player this week, Jackson Ford. Raiders' edges are not necessarily the weakest, but he can get those attacking stats in kind of random weeks. Trading Harris and Moses for SJ and Fanul Blake, is that too sideways? I don't know if SJ is a trade in this week, just because it's a bye next week. I think I'd be just trying to get Cleary in for Moses. And Harris to Fullback, it's another one where I think maybe there's a week where you can maybe wait on it the next couple of weeks, because if Tohu Harris comes out and plays kind of low minutes again, then yeah, there's probably a question mark. We'd say it's probably time to maybe upgrade him. But I'd try to maybe get one more week of information on that. Like, Fullback was solid, but he's not going to score a try and a try assist every week. Do I think Preston could be a hold for the rest of the season? Probably. I mean, yeah, there's a decent chance of it, because he can get those attack stats. But Viliame Kikau was named on the extended bench for the Bulldogs today. So I don't think Preston's job is at risk, but it probably means that Preston is moving to the right-hand side and Kikau on the left, which I think will hamper any attacking stats that Preston could get. Although Preston has been playing some right side anyway, I think. But Preston could be just like a hold in terms of depth for the rest of the season, but I wouldn't be looking at him as a top 3 playing second row forward for the run home. Alright, we'll take one more question and then we'll wrap it up there. How many trades do you need to have up your sleeve for the run home? That's a great question. I think ideally we're in round 21. If you're a head-to-head player, I think you have obviously a few more just to be able to do some different trades here and there. If you're an overall player, if you can have one trade a week for the last month, so say if you've got 3 or 4 trades from round 23, 4 onwards, that might just be about okay. So I think it's still okay for the next couple of weeks to trade to set up your team and everything, but I think you probably want to be cooling off about that round 23 period and just keeping about 1 trade a week just for contingencies. Gutherson or Edwards to trade for Mitchell next week? Probably Gutho. Just he misses an extra game and has a tougher draw as well over Edwards. All right, I think we'll wrap up the stream there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hour 12 minutes, so we're going for a long time. I will quickly just mention, so there won't be any Q&A stream this week because Thursday I'm out, so I won't be able to do one. And I'm actually going overseas on Saturday evening. So there won't be a roundup stream, unfortunately, this week, and there's a good chance that I'm not able to do next week's trade target stream and potentially even the week after as well. I'm going to see if I can put together some kind of a short 15-20 minute video just kind of covering the hot topics, but I won't be able to do the kind of full-blown stream that I'm doing normally. So I just wanted to let you guys know that as well. Apologies. I would love to be able to do it, but yeah, I can't complain with a holiday. So yeah, the next 2 weeks content will look a little bit different. I will try to put out stuff. If I can do the newsletter, that's a good format because it's written. I just need internet connection. So do check out my newsletter if I'm able to get that out in the next couple of weeks. No, I'm not going to Turkey again. I'm going to Tanzania. I'm going to do a safari, which I wanted to do for years because I love animals and lions and all that good stuff. So yeah, I'm going to go for a safari, which should be good fun. A couple of weeks now. So I'll be back. Proper content will be, what are you, 22? Round 24, I'll be back to kind of prop up. So hopefully the next couple of weeks is not too crazy with trades. This week feels like a big trade week, so I'm glad that I was able to at least be able to do this week's. But yeah, just wanted to give you guys an FYI. So yeah, if you're sitting here on a Sunday at night waiting for me, yeah, don't wait for me because I won't be here. But I'll be up in the sky flying somewhere. But thank you everyone for tuning in. Really do appreciate the support. A lot of viewers today, which is fantastic to see. Hopefully I was able to cover off most of your questions. It was a pretty, it is a pretty big week. But yeah, good luck for the week. Do please keep putting questions in the comments and on Twitter, and I'll try to get back to as many of you as I can. But until then, I'll see you next time when I see you. Catch up. Have a good evening.